Most NFL rookies wake up thinking about one thing: their first big direct deposit. That's the tradition. That's the milestone. But Shedeur Sanders woke up and erased millions of dollars in inventory before breakfast. At exactly 10:00 a.m., his SS2 collection quietly went live. No massive countdown, no dramatic rollout, just a clean drop. And 8 minutes later, it was gone. Not low stock, not almost sold out. Completely wiped. Every item, every size finished. Nike wasn't ready for that. Inside their system, dashboards started lighting up. Conversion rates spiked to levels usually reserved for elite NBA launches. Warehouses that were stocked to handle days of demand emptied in hours. Some reports claim servers didn't just lag, they went offline. And suddenly, executives realized they weren't watching a merch drop anymore. They were watching a cultural moment unfold in real time. Here's the part that shocked insiders the most. This wasn't fans buying a Browns logo. This wasn't hometown hype. This was people buying Shedeur Sanders, his name, his image, his momentum. The market wasn't betting on a team, it was betting on a person. And that changes everything. Because in the NFL, rookies usually wait years before brands trust them with serious influence. Pro Bowls, playoff runs, legacy seasons. Shedeur skipped the line. The demand showed up instantly, loud and undeniable. While other players measure success in stats, Sanders measured it in sellouts, in clicks per second, in checkout queues, in people refreshing pages hopping restocks would magically appear. And behind the scenes, the ripple effects were immediate. Whispers started circulating about Nike fast-tracking his signature cleat, design timelines getting compressed, production schedules being pushed forward, emergency acceleration just to keep up with a wave they didn't see coming. This wasn't luck. This wasn't hype alone. This was culture meeting, timing at the perfect moment. And once you understand what the data revealed next, who was buying, where they were coming from, and why this drop completely shattered Nike's prediction models, you'll realize this wasn't just a rookie flex. It was the beginning of a brand takeover. The craziest part is how normal this was supposed to be. Nike didn't treat this like a historic launch. The forecast models predicted a strong rookie debut, solid engagement, healthy sales over a few days, nothing extreme, nothing record-breaking. But the moment the page went live, reality hit hard. Orders started stacking instantly, not gradually, not in waves, all at once. Fans weren't browsing, they weren't hesitating. They were clicking buy like the window might close any second. And in under 10 minutes, inventory that was projected to last days disappeared. Completely. By the time people on the West Coast woke up, most of the collection was already gone. That alone tells you how fast this moved. A national rollout that barely made it past the East Coast before selling out isn't normal behavior. That's frenzy-level demand. Internally, alert systems began firing nonstop. Stock levels crashed across multiple regions. Distribution teams realized restock schedules were suddenly useless. What was supposed to be a smooth rollout turned into a scramble. And here's what makes this even more wild. This wasn't a limited edition sneaker collab. This wasn't a celebrity fashion drop. This was football merchandise. Historically, one of the slowest moving categories compared to sneaker culture. Yet Sanders' drop behaved exactly like a hype release. Fast sellout, massive refresh traffic, checkout queues stacking, fans posting screenshots of confirmations like trophies. That's when it became clear. This wasn't about apparel. It was about momentum. People weren't just buying clothes. They were buying into the idea that Shedeur Sanders is next, that he represents something bigger than a rookie season, that he's the future of the brand side of football. And once that reality settled in, Nike had a much bigger problem to deal with. Because the system wasn't built for what came next. Once the sellout hit, things didn't calm down. They exploded. Inside Nike, teams started scrambling. Live dashboards were updating so fast they barely made sense. Inventory trackers were flashing warnings. Distribution systems flagged shortages across multiple regions. What was supposed to be a controlled rollout turned into damage control. And then the servers started failing. Not slowing, not buffering, failing. Some reports claim internal systems couldn't handle the sudden traffic surge. Checkout errors popped up, pages froze, and suddenly Nike realized their forecasting tools hadn't just missed the mark, they had completely underestimated the scale of what was happening. Emergency meetings were reportedly called. Not celebration meetings, crisis meetings. Executives needed answers. Supply chain managers were pushed to explain why warehouses emptied so fast. Marketing teams scrambled to figure out whether they could slow demand without killing momentum. And financial teams sat glued to live sales dashboards watching numbers spike at a pace they weren't prepared to explain. One insider comment that circulated summed up the mood perfectly. This demand is off the charts in ways we've never seen before. And that's when things reportedly reached the very top. Sources claim the situation escalated high enough that Nike leadership personally stepped in asking for immediate breakdowns of what went wrong and why the system wasn't ready. When that happens, it's not about small mistakes. It's about witnessing a moment the infrastructure wasn't built to handle. Because Nike didn't just move a lot of product. They watched a cultural wave smash into their supply chain. Warehouses emptied faster than projected. Regional stock vanished before stores even opened. Algorithms designed to predict athlete demand suddenly became useless. And here's the part that really caught them off guard. The buying behavior didn't match any traditional football merch patterns, which is when they started digging into the data. And what they found completely flipped their expectations. When Nike finally slowed things down enough to analyze what happened, the data didn't make sense at first. Shedeur Sanders' conversion rate, the percentage of people who clicked and actually bought, reportedly blew past internal benchmarks. Not just rookie benchmarks, not just NFL benchmarks. It outperformed athletes who have been moving merchandise for years. Some insiders even suggested his numbers rivaled, and in certain moments outpaced, active NBA superstars. That's unheard of, because football merchandise usually relies on team loyalty, city pride, long-term fan bases. What Shedeur produced was individual pull. People weren't buying because of standings or playoff hopes. They were buying because they wanted him. And the speed made it even more ridiculous. At the 72-hour mark, his collection didn't just outperform rookie launches. It surpassed sales totals that normally take established NFL stars an entire season to reach. That's not a slow burn. That's a flash explosion. Nike's forecasting models were built using years of athlete performance data, social engagement trends, market behavior patterns. None of them predicted this. Not even close. The algorithms didn't glitch. They simply weren't designed to measure cultural hype moving this fast. And here's the twist that changed everything. The audience buying this merch wasn't who Nike expected. It wasn't the traditional football crowd. It wasn't just hardcore sports fans. It was something completely different. And once Nike saw who was actually clicking buy, they realized Shedeur Sanders had unlocked a formula nobody else in the NFL had cracked yet. When Nike broke down the buyer data, the results were shocking. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just selling to traditional NFL fans. He was pulling in Gen Z buyers at massive rates, a demographic that normally skips team jerseys and generic player merch suddenly showed up in force. That alone raised eyebrows. But then another stat jumped off the screen. Women made up nearly half of the total purchases. That completely shattered Nike's demographic expectations. Their internal models for football merchandise weren't built for that kind of gender balance. In a category historically dominated by male buyers, Sanders flipped the pattern in a single drop. And it didn't stop there. International traffic surged. Buyers from Europe and Asia flooded the site like it was a limited edition sneaker release. Time zones didn't matter. Regions didn't matter. The buying behavior looked identical to major hype collaborations normally reserved for artists and fashion icons, not rookie quarterbacks. That's when the realization hit. This wasn't team merchandise. This was lifestyle branding. People weren't buying because of wins and losses. They were buying because the brand felt cool, because it felt current, because it felt connected to culture instead of tradition. Shedeur Sanders didn't position himself like a typical NFL rookie. He positioned himself like a modern creator. Style, confidence, visual identity, personality, all packaged into something people wanted to wear, not just support. And that's when executives started connecting the dots. This wasn't accidental. It was designed, which leads directly to the symbol that made all of this stick. At the center of this entire explosion was one simple symbol: the SS crown. To most people, it looked clean, stylish, minimal, but inside Nike, that logo represented months of work. Reports suggest the design team went through more than 15 different versions before Shedeur Sanders gave final approval. Every curve, every angle, every detail mattered. Because this wasn't just about making something that looked good. It had to mean something. The goal was clear: honor the Prime legacy without copying it. Build something bold without feeling forced. Create an identity that felt powerful without screaming for attention. And they nailed it. The interlocking S design paired with subtle crown elements didn't feel like football branding. It felt like status, confidence, ambition, something people wanted to associate themselves with. Once the drop hit, the logo didn't stay on Nike's website for long. It flooded TikTok, outfit videos, reaction clips, style breakdowns, Instagram feeds filled with people flexing the gear like it was already legendary. Some even started treating it like a badge of proof they were early to the movement. That's when Nike realized something important. This wasn't just merchandise selling. This was identity-based buying. People weren't purchasing fabric and stitching. They were buying into a mindset. Wearing the SS crown became a statement. It said something without saying anything at all. And when branding reaches that level, it doesn't stay contained. Because the rest of the industry was watching closely. And once competitors saw these numbers, panic set in. Once Shedeur Sanders' sales data started circulating inside the industry, the reaction was immediate. And it wasn't calm. Reports suggest Adidas pulled together emergency strategy sessions in less than 24 hours. No long planning cycles, no slow analysis, just executives scrambling to understand how Nike landed this moment first and how they missed it. Because this wasn't just one athlete performing well. This was a shift in how influence works. Under Armour and other major brands reportedly ramped up scouting efforts almost overnight, but not the old-school scouting focused on 40-yard dashes and combined numbers. They started hunting for cultural gravity, social pull, digital presence, personality that translates beyond sports. That's the new battlefield. For decades, brands waited for athletes to prove themselves on the field before investing heavily. Pro Bowls, championships, years of consistency. Shedeur Sanders flipped that timeline completely. He didn't need seasons of proof. He delivered market impact immediately. That forced uncomfortable conversation inside boardrooms. If one rookie can generate this kind of response, what happens when another athlete with even more reach enters the league? What happens when cultural relevance outpaces traditional performance metrics? Executives started realizing the old playbook is outdated. The business side of sports is no longer just about who scores the most points. It's about who controls attention, who drives trends, who makes people care beyond game day. And that's why this moment sent shockwaves. Because Nike didn't just sell merchandise. They captured a movement early. And when competitors realize they're behind on a movement, they don't sit back. They panic, they adjust, they change strategy fast. But the biggest surprise wasn't the industry reaction. It was what happened next with Shedeur Sanders himself. Because while brands were scrambling to keep up, his leverage exploded. The moment Nike's internal numbers leaked across the industry, everything changed. This wasn't just a successful merch drop anymore. It was a warning shot. Reports suggest Adidas executives rushed into emergency strategy meetings within hours of seeing the data. Not days, not weeks, hours. When billion-dollar brands move that fast, it's because something unexpected just happened and they know they're behind. Because this wasn't about Shedeur Sanders selling shirts. This was about Nike catching the next cultural wave before anyone else even saw it coming. Inside competitor boardrooms, the conversation reportedly flipped overnight. Instead of asking, "Who's the best athlete?" they started asking, "Who controls attention? Who has social gravity? Who can move people before they even step on the field?" That's a massive shift. Under Armour and other major brands quickly began ramping up scouting on younger athletes, not just for performance but for influence, personality, style, digital presence, the ability to spark conversation outside sports circles. The old model is dying. Waiting 3 years for rookies to prove themselves on the field before building their brand no longer works. Shedeur Sanders broke that timeline in a single week. He didn't wait for awards. He didn't wait for playoff runs. He showed up with presence, and the market responded instantly. That forced uncomfortable questions inside the industry. If one rookie quarterback can create this level of demand, what happens when the next one arrives? What happens if Nike just locked in the next generational brand figure before anyone else even noticed? That's why this moment hit so hard. Because it wasn't just about money. It was about control. Nike didn't just move product. They positioned themselves ahead of the next era of athlete branding, and everyone else suddenly realized they were chasing from behind. But the wildest part, while the industry was scrambling to react, Shedeur Sanders' personal leverage was exploding behind the scenes. And that's where things really started getting serious. While brands were scrambling and competitors were playing catch-up, something even bigger was happening behind the scenes. Shedeur Sanders' original deal was never built for this kind of momentum. Reports started circulating that his contract structure couldn't keep up with the revenue wave he just triggered. Bonus thresholds that were designed to be hit over months, wiped out in hours. Performance triggers meant to reward long-term growth, activated almost instantly. That's when urgent conversations reportedly began. Not in the future, not after the season, immediately. Because when an athlete outperforms projections this fast, the power dynamic flips. The company isn't just paying for potential anymore, they're paying to keep pace with reality. And here's the part that surprised insiders the most. Nike didn't push back. No public resistance, no slowdown, no hesitation. That silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. It meant one thing: they understood exactly who held leverage in this situation. At this point, Shedeur Sanders wasn't just a sponsored athlete. He was an asset, a moving engine of attention, culture, and revenue. And when someone brings that level of value to the table, negotiations stop being one-sided. This is the new era of athlete power. Not built only on touchdowns or stat lines, but on influence, on audience pull, on the ability to create demand instantly. That's why this moment feels different. Because traditionally, rookies wait years to gain this type of leverage. Shedeur compressed that timeline into days. He didn't wait for approval. He forced the market to respond. But here, the reality check. All this power, all this hype, all this momentum still comes with one condition. You have to deliver when the lights come on. And that's where the pressure really starts. All the hype, all the sales, all the cultural buzz comes with one unavoidable truth. You still have to perform. The spotlight doesn't care about merch numbers. Fans don't stay loyal to logos if Sundays don't deliver. And no matter how strong the brand becomes, football always gets the final vote. That's the pressure Shedeur Sanders is walking into right now. Because expectations aren't normal anymore. He's not entering the league quietly. He's entering with eyes locked on every throw, every decision, every drive. The margin for error shrinks when you become the face of something bigger than yourself. But this is where Sanders separates himself. Camp reports haven't been about flashy headlines. They've been about efficiency, sharp reads, quick processing, high completion percentages, coaches talking about command in the huddle, teammates responding to leadership. That's the foundation that keeps hype alive. And fans feel it. People can tell the difference between corporate marketing and real confidence built on preparation. One fades fast, the other compounds. That's why this momentum hasn't cooled off yet. Because it isn't floating on empty noise. It's anchored to performance potential. When someone buys Shedeur Sanders gear, they're not just buying fabric. They're placing a bet. They're investing emotionally. They're saying, I believe this guy is about to be special. That's heavy. Because emotional investment is fragile. Win and it multiplies. Lose momentum and it evaporates. That's the reality of modern sports branding. And Sanders knows it. He isn't playing to protect hype. He's playing to justify it. Which is why this moment feels so different from typical rookie buzz. It isn't built on highlights alone. It's built on expectation. And when expectation meets performance, that's when careers change. What Shedeur Sanders just pulled off wasn't a lucky moment. It was a blueprint shift. He proved that athletes don't have to wait for legacy seasons to build influence. You can create demand first, then force the industry to catch up. Culture now moves faster than tradition, and Sanders is riding that wave perfectly. Nike didn't just sell merchandise. They witnessed the birth of a new type of sports brand, one driven by identity, connection, and timing instead of just stats and championships. Now the spotlight is locked in. If Sanders delivers on the field, this won't be remembered as a viral merch moment. It will be remembered as the launch of a generational brand. Because this wasn't the peak. It was the opening chapter. And the rest of the league, they're watching closely.